But we're in Psalm 31 today, and for those of you who are going, what about Ruth? What happened to Ruth? Are we not going to finish Ruth? Yes, we're going to finish Ruth, and we're going to go back into Ruth next week. And let me just tell you, Ruth chapter 3, it's where we left off in Ruth chapter 2. Ruth chapter 3, if you've read ahead, and if you haven't, you should. It's bizarre, and I don't really know what to do with it, to be honest with you. It's craziness, what's happening there. So come and just see me fall apart on the stage trying to explain what's happening in Ruth chapter 3. But yeah, we'll kick back into Ruth chapter 3 next week. Psalm 31, we just heard it read, and I don't know if you caught this when you were hearing this being read. Psalm 31, this is a psalm that is written by a guy named David, who was a famous king for Israel. It was, as we saw last week, he is in the line. It was the Messiah, Jesus, came out of the line of David, and here's David, and he's writing this in a lot of these psalms he's written, but he's writing this in you just kind of get the idea, like, what is going on with David here? Like, he's just kind of swinging back and forth. And like, for a moment, he starts out with, in the first part of 31, he's going, "In you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Never let me be put to shame. In your righteousness, deliver me. Like, save me, rescue me. I need rescue." Like, I don't know what's going on, but he's going, I need rescued. Like, there's a situation going on, and we know that he had been chased down by as king, and there was he had been chased down by his friends had turned on him, and his own son had turned on him. And so it could be that was what was going on in this moment. But whatever it is, he's going, God, I need saving. I need rescuing. And then by verse 7, he's like rejoicing and laughing and having a good time. And then by verse 9, he's like holding on for dear life. Verse 9, he says, "Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eye is wasted from grief, my soul and my body also. For my life is spent with sorrow, and my years with sighing, and my strength fails because of my iniquity. My bones waste away." It's like, what is going on? Like, he's up, and then he's down, and he's up. Like, what is happening with David here? But when you think about it, it's really not all that unusual, is it? I mean, that's kind of par for the course. I mean, that's really life. That's our life, right? I mean, this is essentially what life does. It's like in one season, you're like, everything is great. And the next season is like, what happened? The bottom falls out. And then the next season, you're up again. It's like, what's happening? Like, but this is just the way life goes. There are times when things go well. And let's just be honest. Sometimes things going well is just like when nothing terrible is happening, right? It's not that there's so much like, man, life is it's just like nothing bad is happening. Like, so oftentimes people will ask me, like, how you doing? And I'm like, well, as far as I know, everything's okay. As far as I know. I mean, there could be some things blown up that I don't know about, but as far as I know, and so and when that happens, like, okay, life is good because nothing's blowing up, you know? Kids aren't fighting, like that's a good thing. Sometimes that's just it. Like, kids aren't fighting. Life is great. Anybody know what I mean? Anybody? I mean, just me. It's like, and here's the thing, school is like coming back in session this week. Can we get an amen? All right, what's wrong with you people? You're just like, your kids are sitting next to you, so you're like, I don't want to offend my kid. Like, come on. But all of us have this experience of life when you have times in your life when things are going well, but then before you know it, you hit some hard times. Like, things in the family are going well, and then all of a sudden, things are not. There are times in your life where, perhaps in your marriage, where things are like, hey, things are good. It's a joy to be married. It's a delight to be married. And then there are times when it's just hard. And you're like, we're the same two people. What happened? Like, why was it good and now it's hard? Like, what's going on? And it just happens. There are times when things click with your friends, and then there are times when you just feel alone. There are times when everybody's healthy, and then times when health fails you, or health fails to someone that you love. There are times when God feels near, and you can't wait to get to your knees and pray, and you can't wait to get to can't wait to get to the Bible. And there are times when reading the Bible and praying are the last thing on your mind. This is what David describes in 31, not only 31, but in 30 as well. But right in the middle of all of this, right in the middle of like, God save me and I'm rejoicing and God rescue me, like right in the middle of all of this, David says something. He makes a statement about God that is the anchor that is holding David together in the midst of all of these ups and downs. Because here's the thing, David's his biggest fear in life was that he would not experience the presence of God. Like that was it. Like his biggest fear in life, he had a lot, I mean, he was a king. I mean, he had a lot going on and he had a family, but his biggest fear in all of life is that he would go through life and he would miss, that he would not experience the presence of God. And so the one thing that David was seeking, the one thing that David longed for more than anything else was the presence of God, to experience the presence of God. And so navigating the good times and the hard times, what comfort did he have? What solace did David have when life just seemed to be so random, when it seemed like injustice was winning, and when it seemed like God was just a million miles away at times? What did David hold on to that gave him comfort and stability in the midst of all of it? Here it is in verse 15. He said, my times are in your hand. My times are in your hand. Times are good, times are hard. No matter what the times are, my times are in your hand. In other words, this life with its experiences that can seem so random, one day to the next and one season to the next, it's not random. It's not simply a product of my circumstances. All of those moments, all of my times, God, are in your hand. In the midst of what seems to be the chaos of life, David understood that his life, our lives, are caught up in the providence of God. Another way you could say that is that God is sovereign, meaning that what happens in this world and what happens in your life and what happens in my life, they happen because it's what God is doing. God is over it all, working all of it out according to his purpose and his plan. In other words, the way the universe got started is not by God, creating and then winding it up and letting it go and say, hey, we'll see how this goes. And then when something happens, it's like, okay, so they need me over here, I'll jump in over here. All right, so there's a disaster, there's a tragedy, I'll jump in over here. There's somebody hurting over here, I'll jump in over here. That's not the way it is. No, he is working it all out. He is directing it all according to his purpose and his plan. So since my times are in his hands, since your times, the seasons of life, all of life is in his hand, then that has massive implications for our life. And I just want to mention a few of them. One of them is this: since my times are in his hands, there are no ordinary days. If my times are in his hands, then there are no ordinary days. The Bible teaches and Christians believe that the best thing that anyone could possibly receive is to be reconciled to God through Christ Jesus. And then to dwell or to abide or to experience his presence throughout their entire life. That there is nothing in this world that can hold me up. There's there's no experience in this world. There's nothing that this world can give me. There's nothing that I can chase after. There's nothing that I can own. There's nothing that I could buy. There's no relationship. There's nothing that I can get that can hold me up. There's nothing in the world that cannot be taken from me. The job that I have, the financial security that you might enjoy, the friends that I have, my kids, my spouse, my health, all of it can be gone in a moment. Now, I don't have the guarantee for any of it. All of it can be gone in a moment. And if I've made any of those things the thing that I cannot live without, the thing that I cannot be happy without, then I'm in trouble. That if financial security is the thing that's like, as long as I've got that, then I'm good. As long as I've got that, then I'm content, then I'm happy, then I'm in trouble if financial security is where my source of happiness and contentment is found and security is found. If it's in my kids, if it's in my spouse, if it's in a friendship, if it's in a dating relationship, if it's in anything here, then in any of it can be taken away. But there is something, if my hope is in something that cannot be taken, if the one thing that I've put my hope in is the presence of God, then I can stand. I could say it. I'm not saying that losing some of those things wouldn't shake me to my core. But even if I lose all of it, the source of my hope, the source of my joy is intact. I will not fall apart because of what I've put my hope in. My trust is in something that can never be taken away. So if being reconciled to God in Jesus, in other words, another way to say that is being saved from your sin, becoming a daughter or a son of God rather than an enemy of God, being reconciled to God in Jesus and then experiencing his presence is the best that I could ever be given, then anything that leads me into those things, anything that leads me into faith in Jesus, anything that leads me into the presence of God is what I need more than anything else. So God, in his kindness and in his mercy, he is leading his people into these things because he loves you, because he is kind, because he is a good father. What he is leading you into is the thing that is the best that life can offer. And that is into a reconciled relationship with God in his presence. So all that he is doing is leading you into these things, it's directing your path to your greatest good, which is his presence. So then, there are no ordinary days. God is using every moment, 365 days in the year, to lead me to him. That being said, since my times are in his hands, the good times shouldn't lead me to pride. Like the good times shouldn't lead me to pride. If my times are in his hands and he is using every moment to bring me to him, to his presence, then the good times come to me because they're allowed and they are directed by God, meaning that the good times or the times of prosperity, they're intentional, that God is using them. They're not just, it's not just a random thing, a random season. It is something that God is allowing to come into my life. It's intentional. Yes, prosperity is a gift from God, but prosperity is also a test. It is both, prosperity and pleasure is both a gift and a test. In Psalm 30, back in Psalm 30, David is going through this journey of emotions, just like he did in Psalm 31. And he tells us in verse 6 and 7 in Psalm 30 that he's not necessarily handling it too well. Here's what he says. He says in verse 6 in Psalm 30, he says, "As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. By your favor, O Lord, you made my mountain stand strong." So here he's experienced a season of good time, like a season of prosperity. And on one hand, David is going, look, I know it was God who did this. I know it was God who brought me to this season of prosperity. I know it was God who did this. He's the one who made my mountain stand strong. And knowing that prosperity comes from God, it should have been received as a gift. Like, God, thank you for this season, this good season. Like, you've given me more than I could ask for. Like, thank you for this. And it should have moved David toward gratitude, toward a bigger vision of God as the one who provides, the one who is so generous, the one who is kind. But instead, David took this gift of prosperity. David took this season of prosperity that God had given him, and he turned it in on himself. And prosperity turned him arrogant to where he says, I shall never be moved. Like, look at my life. Look how things are going. Look what I have. I got my wealth. I've got health. Everything is going well. Nobody can touch me. Man, isn't this what prosperity does so often? Like, things go well in your life, and you're going, my life is good. What do I need? It turns us away from God, and it turns us to us. People will talk about, often I have conversations just pretty regularly where people talk about the problem of pain, where how people wrestle with the existence of God or even the goodness of God because of the presence of pain. They go through some experience that is painful. They watch somebody they love go through some painful experience. Like, I don't know if God exists, and then why is this happening? Or if God is good, then how could this happen? And so it causes people to turn away from God. And I hear people say that from time to time. But I think the bigger problem is the problem not of pain, but the problem of prosperity. Perhaps more people, I have seen more people turn away from Christianity because of pleasure and prosperity. And listen, and they don't do it in a way to go, oh, things are good, I'm leaving God now. That's not the way it goes. It's subversive. It's people who are self-proclaimed Christians, and then life is going well, life is going easy for them, and before you know it, they just kind of back off. They just kind of slip out. They're not so dependent. You see their relationship with the church kind of slip away. They're not so generous. They're not so much a servant anymore because, man, look at my life. Like, what do I need? And they don't let them say this out loud, but essentially what they're saying with their life is, I don't need God. I got it. I got it together. Why would I need God? My life is going well. And it turns us inward. If prosperity is not received with humility as a gift from God, it turns us inward. It puffs us up to where I think, I'm not ever going to be moved. Who can touch me? Or we misinterpret prosperity to think that, well, as long as things seem to be going well, my family is good, I've got friends to hang out with, I've got money in the bank, God must be really pleased with me. I mean, look how my life is going. And that's because we're conditioned to think that good gifts from God can only look like removal of pain or the experience of some pleasure. That if God has given me a gift, if God has given me a good gift, that means that my life is free from pain and I'm only experiencing pleasure and prosperity. And yet in Romans chapter 1, we see the example of a group of people who take God's gifts and they turn them inward, and God judges them. And you know how he judges them? He doesn't judge them by taking away the things that they love. No, he judges them by giving them, by allowing them to have everything that they want. And by living it up, getting all that they've ever wanted, it destroys them. But unless something goes wrong, nobody ever stops to think about their life. And so everything must be great. God must be pleased, but it is the kindness of God, it's the mercy of God to bring something into your life, to disrupt your life, to see your need for God. Because otherwise, prosperity, we can misinterpret prosperity and think that God, well, as long as things are good, God must be pleased. It's like the guy who fell out of the 20th story window, and as he was passing the 10th floor, somebody heard him say, "So far, so good." If we're not paying attention, we can misinterpret the good times. Prosperity is both a gift and a test. A gift so that we might see God. We might get a bigger vision. Like, look who God is. Look what he has done. Look how kind he is. Look at his provision. And it's a test to see where we are putting our hope. When the good times come, whether they come as a gift or a test, they are ultimately to get us to the presence of God. Well, since my times are in his hands, the good times shouldn't lead us to pride, but the hard times shouldn't lead us to panic. My times are in his hands. The hard times shouldn't lead me to panic. I've talked about some of my OCD issues in the past that I've experienced over the years, and some of the things like, I heard a verse one time, Ecclesiastes 10 said, a wise man's heart inclines him to the right, but a fool's heart to the left. So in my OCD mind, what I thought was, well, anytime I enter a room, I always got to go to the right. That's what I did. And it's foolishness, but it was like, no, if I don't, this is a problem. And so I would go to the right. And so if something I needed, if I needed to be right there, but it's on my left, I would take the right, and I'd just walk around and just go and get to it. And I wouldn't say anything. It's just what I did. Just nonsense. Or if I tapped something, I have to tap it a certain amount of times, because if I don't tap it this many times, then, who knows what could happen. Something bad's going to happen. That's the thing. Because that's the thing. I don't know how other people deal like OCD, but that for me, in my mind, it was, if I don't do this thing, then something bad will happen. So I've got to do this thing. And so if I would tap, I don't know how many, it was just random. Like I've tapped it. Typically was like 7, because, that's like the godly number, right? So 7. And I would tap something 7 times, and certainly never 6, right? Never 6. And so if I had tapped it 6, I'm like, did I get that last one in? I don't know if I didn't get, and so I'd have to go back and I had to do it all over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So and it just mattered. Now I got 13. And so it's just crazy stuff. And I've told you this before, but there've been times, I know this freaks some of you guys out, but there've been times I've been in conversation with somebody, and in my mind, they've had, like, the person I'm talking to has to say this word, and if they don't say this word, something bad's going to happen. And so I got to navigate the conversation so that you say this certain word. And I mentioned at one point, and I had several people come up to me and say, wait, so have you done that to me? like probably, I don't know. But listen, it's maddening. It was maddening. And what got me through that nonsense has got me for years of my life, what gets me through it even today, is the realization that I need a bigger vision of God. That my obsession was more of an obsession of control than anything else. And listen, control is an illusion. To think that somehow my ridiculous walking around something or tapping something or getting someone to say something, that's ludicrous. There is only one who is in control. There is only one who directs the things that happen, and it's not me and my superstitions. The fears and anxieties that we experience from putting our trust in things that we know cannot hold us up, in things that can be taken in any moment. This is why we fear. This is why we experience anxiety, because our hope is in something that, who knows, if that goes wrong, then my hope is gone. If that goes wrong, then my peace is gone. My joy is gone. This is why we fear. This is why we have anxiety. To say that another way, our fears and anxieties can be traced to a lack of confidence in God's sovereignty, that God is really the one in control, that He is working it all to lead us to our greatest good, which is more of Him. So then whatever gets us more of Him is good. It's a good gift of God. And oftentimes, what gets us there, what gets us more of Him, the means by which we get what we really need, are in and through hard times. But if our times are in His hand, then when the hard times come, we don't have to panic, because 1, we know that those hard times only come to us if God allows it. And 2, that those hard times are limited by only what God allows. You remember Job. Job, he loses his family, he loses his wealth, he loses his health. Do you remember how Job got into all of this mess? It all began with a conversation that Satan had with God, and Satan asked God for permission to take it from him. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus tells Peter that Satan has asked Jesus to sift Satan like wheat. That's what he says. Can you imagine just like God just coming to you and just somehow and saying, hey, listen, I just want to tell you, Mick, listen, been having a conversation and Satan has asked me to like mess up your world, all right? Just want you to know this is what's coming. Like, can you imagine that? But what comfort do you have? Hey, he's got, like, if he's going to do it, he's got permission, and he's under the authority of a hand, the Father who loves you. And so when we should know that when God tells Satan, when God allows Satan to do what Satan does, Satan can only go so far. He allows Satan to work, but only to the extent that it serves God's purpose for us. So if you're in that season, and maybe it's like, man, it's been a few days, man, or maybe it's been a week. It's perhaps you'd be like 2023, man. I can't wait for 2023 to get the heck out of here because it has been a year. Listen, if you're in that season, the right play isn't to shake your fist at heaven, but to ask, God, what are you up to? What is it that God is doing in me? What is it that God is wanting to teach me? What is it that God is wanting to remove from me? And let me tell you, God meets us in that place. He meets us in that place. He reveals things to us in a way that we cannot see when everything is going our way. So some of you have experienced God free you from certain addictions. And some of you are still struggling. And it's in the freedom that God is blessing some. And it's in the struggle that God has chosen to bless others. Because it's what's getting you more of Him. Listen, I know if you're going through it right now, it seems a bit cliche to, like, okay, I know this is what we're supposed to say in church, right? This is what you're supposed to hear when you come to a place like this. But listen, church, listen, we've been in this long enough together. Like, we've been through some stuff together. Like, we've cried together. We have grieved together. We have pleaded together with the Lord to change what was happening. We have rejoiced together. We have celebrated together. We have been through enough together that we can look back and we can share the stories and talk about how God's sovereign hand was in all of it. Amen? Jesus says that God is sovereign over the birds. That God is sovereign over the birds, that He provides for them what they need. And so Jesus says this, so then how much more will He provide for the ones, and how much more is He involved in the ones that He has set His love upon? So we can with confidence know that whatever God allows to come to us is exactly what we need. And He will not leave us. This is His plan that He is working through, that He is seeing through. And maybe we won't see what it was all about tomorrow. Or maybe even next year, we won't be able to see what that was all about. But even if it takes heaven, we will one day see how it all came together. And we will spend forever praising Him and thanking Him for finishing what He started in us. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, He was facing the very thing that He had just prayed hours before that God would not allow Him to face. He was in the garden going, I don't want to do this. I take it away. I don't want to walk through this. I don't want to face it. What was He praying for God to take away? I don't want to face your wrath, God. It was the wrath of God for sin, for sinners, that He would take upon Himself. So here He is on the cross, and He is facing the thing that He'd asked God just a few hours ago to not allow Him to walk through. And in His dying breath, Jesus reaches back to Psalm 31, and He quotes David when he says in verse 5, He says, into your hand I commit my spirit. And that same resurrected King is the one who invites us to bring to Him our worries and our fears and our anxieties and our disappointments, as well as our pleasures and prosperity, along with all of the normal, mundane getting up and driving to work, sitting in class, going to practice, going to the games, changing the diapers, making dinner, to bring all of it and see that in all of it, God is using it to give us what we need the most, to know Him and experience His presence. I'm not saying we'll get all of our questions answered, but even in not having your questions answered and not knowing what's coming in 2024, good times, hard times, like how do you rest when you don't know what's around the corner? Whether things are good or whether it's hard, you are under the care and the sovereign hand of your Father in heaven. My times are in your hands. That's how you go into 2024. My times are in your hands. And that's how you can go to bed tonight and sleep.